Good morning, everybody. I wanted to just let you know that Mr. Verbo had a problem getting onto Zoom. I just sent him a link again, so we'll be starting shortly.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone, it's September. Can you believe it?
No.
Amazing. I don't know what happened to August. It just disappeared.
The whole summer flew by.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it was great that it was not a really flaming hot summer. We're so far really
True.
lucky. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know about you, but my link didn't work. It said webinar expired. So Cheryl had to send me a new one.
Oh my gosh.
So, but apparently yours, Jan, yours and Robert's worked, huh?
Indeed.
Sorry
Poor
about that.
guy.
Sorry about that, Mr.
Okay, well, in any
Verbo.
case, we're a few minutes late. Sorry about that, the public, but we will get started. Let's go ahead and begin. As usual, we'll call it to order and we'll begin with our roll call.
Absolutely. Mr. Enns,
Here.
Ms. Marks,
Here,
and Mr. Verbo.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Okay, we will proceed with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you care to join me, please stand and I will lead the salute to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance
with allegiance to the flag.
to the flag of the United States of America
States of
and to the
America,
republic for
to
which
the
it
republic
stands,
for which
one
it
nation,
stands,
under God,
one nation,
indivisible,
under God,
with liberty and
indivisible,
justice for
with
all.
liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. We will proceed. That we have, I don't know if we'll leave this to council or not, but we had a closed session on August 23rd. And we also had a closed session at our August 4th meeting, but we have, I think we reported out on that at our August 11th regular full board meeting. But in any case, we have, there's, I believe, and council can correct me if I'm wrong, we have no reportable action from our August 23rd special meeting.
Yeah, that's correct. We reported it when we came out, but nobody was present due to the time.
Right, nobody was present at that time, so we're just mentioning it now. Okay, so before we proceed into the rest of the agenda, we will open it to public comment for items not on the agenda, but under the purview of the IWMA Executive Committee. Do we have any public comment?
Yeah, at this time, if an attendee wishes to make a comment, they may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of their screen, or if they're on the phone, you may hit *9. And Patty, I'm going to unshare your screen so I can get my timer up. Okay. Okay, Janine, you should be allowed to unmute yourself.
Okay. Janine, if you're there, go ahead.
There we go. Good morning, team members. I have several public comments. Last week we camped at the County Oceano, I think it's called Memorial Campground by the lagoon in Oceano. And once again, note that there are no blue bins or green waste bins in the campground. The only thing is the big gray trash bin. So people are putting in all their cans and bottles and well, everything mixed into this container. And as a county park, it doesn't send a good message to any of our visitors or us local people that are camping there. I don't understand the message that you're sending when we have the mandate to do that. The other thing is that the Slow City concert in the park, a week ago we attended, there was a blue bin right by the wine place where they were serving. It was being used as a regular trash bin. Food, garbage, and of course recycled beer cans were there. Again, for a public concert where there's probably 1,000 people attending, the message is completely not understandable. And we need to do that. We need to get this correct. And I want to urge that to happen this year. So I have more comments later on, but that'll go for now, since this is not on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Okay, we will go ahead then and proceed on to our acting executive director's report. And I will just make a comment. I unfortunately have a hard stop about between 1:15 and 1:30 that I need to go to another event or meeting. And so I'm going to try to be better than I usually am about moving things along. So, and we do have some meaty subjects to cover today. So anyway, I will turn it over to Patty to give us the executive director's report.
Okay, and given that we do have a lot to cover today, I'm just going to be really brief. There are a couple of things that I wanted to let everybody know. We did send out the waiver, draft waiver, the 1383 letter, as well as the edible food letter to the special districts, county, yes, even the county, and the cities. So they can take in, we can get their input on those 3 documents. Next up is we received, while I was out last week, a letter from John Ryan, Coal Canyon Material Recovery Facility. He wants to terminate, it was a notice of termination for the lease agreement for Science Discovery for this agency to use the Ed Center for the field trips. I called Mr. Ryan and spoke to him directly, asking if he would be into or amenable to postponing usage until Delta or any other variant calmed down. His answer at that time was no. So I need to get input from the executive committee, and I wanted to find out what your thoughts, questions, concerns on this topic are.
Patty, you and I discussed this briefly yesterday because you had let us know that we'd received such a letter. And of course, the question is what, why do they want to do this?
Good question.
Under the liability concerns, et cetera. The other thing is we went through this once before where they'd sent a letter and then they backed off. And I'm not sure who Mr. Ryan works for, but I'm wondering if you, on our guidance, could bring this up to his, whoever is next up in the chain of command, so to speak.
Okay, I can do that.
Does Jan, or Robert, do you have comments?
I just have one of Linda Summers Smith. When something like this comes up on our director's report and it technically has not been agendized for someone that might be interested in this subject, can we discuss this or make a decision, or what are we supposed to do?
I think you're just directing staff. I don't think you're making a decision on anything. I don't think that there's enough information available at this point. And I'm looking through here, I don't see the letter.
No, I'm just asking about the procedure.
Yeah.
It's something that is not.
I think, though, one of the things we could
agendized.
appropriately do, though, would be whether or not, we're giving Patty a little direction, make some more inquiries, but Patty could come back at next week's full board meeting and maybe put this on as an item where you're seeking full board guidance if necessary. We may not need any guidance from the full board.
Well, I'd like to hear it from the full board specifically because I'd like to know what the county's thinking, and are they a part of this?
I think that makes sense.
perhaps then we suggest, Patty, that we put it on next week's full board agenda for
Sounds good.
discussion. In the meantime, Patty can see what else she can find out and perhaps speak to higher ups there to make sure that's really the company policy, if you will, to ask us to leave.
Excellent. I'll do that.
All right. Thank you, Patty.
And
You're
what would-
welcome.
would
I'm
the
sorry,
dis-
Robert, go ahead.
The displays and things that are in there, do they belong to us?
They do. So that would mean if it is a hard no, then we will need to remove those displays as well as, I don't know, roughly 30 chairs or so,
Okay.
and find a new home for those. Maybe it's donating them or not. Okay.
Okay, I know there was some stuff in there and I did think it belonged to the IWMA, so.
Excellent question. Yeah. So again, we'll just bring it before the full board, and then I'll reach out to Sue, who, as I understand it, I'll certainly be corrected if I'm wrong, who is the direct supervisor for Mr. Ryan, and open a conversation with her based on your direction. And then finally, one more thing. I know we're pressed for time today. One of our staff members, Emily Dominguez, our SB 1383 coordinator, has resigned. I understand she's taking another position, and so we are down 3 staff, FYI. And that ends my oral report, unless anybody has any questions on the credit card or on the payables.
I reviewed the financials and I didn't really have any questions. Jan or Robert, do you have any questions on the financial statements or
No, I
anything
don't.
else?
Not
I did have one comment I wanted to make at this point, though. Emily has resigned, but I'm curious, has she taken a job with the county by any chance?
Not that I know of.
Okay, then I want to report, I guess maybe it's supposed to come up later, but Peter Cohen has given Cold Canyon a notice and he's going to go to work for the county.
That's correct, Mr. Cron.
Yes, thanks.
Mhm.
But as I understand, it, Robert, that position is not one of the new positions that the county is,
Well, I'm
creating,
surprised to
in
hear that.
anticipation of the departure. It is a previously existing position that they've been trying to fill. I spoke with Mr. Cron yesterday, and he'd mentioned in passing that Friday would be his last day at Waste Connections. And so I kind of specifically inquired, well, is this one of the positions the county is creating? And he said, no, it was pre-existing position.
That's interesting. And my guess is.
I'm sure he might get sucked into, the additional
Mhm.
workload created by
Yeah.
the county's withdrawal,
I'm
but
betting
that's
on
not, what the position was for.
Yeah, I'm betting on it. Okay,
Backing up a little bit, I would like to direct staff to advertise the 1383 coordinator position that now is open because Emily has resigned. I don't know the exact her last date, but that's a very important a staff position. I mean, all staff positions are important, but I'd like to make sure that we're on it in terms of replacing Emily.
Well, Jan, I think, we're going to be, as we just, well, I don't know if we have a specific discussion on budgetary matters we had in the past. I would like to consider that in light of our short-term budgetary revenue shortfall problem, that we kind of give
Okay.
that due consideration before we automatically do that, which we would in normal
Okay, that makes sense.
times, kind of automatically expect staff to go out and re-advertise that. I'd kind of like, I think that's something we probably need to discuss a little more in light of our budgetary situation. And I'm not
Okay,
sure if
So
we'll
I'll withdraw that comment.
not sure if we'll discuss that in a later agenda item here, or if it's
Mhm.
something we want to address at the full board meeting. Okay, any other questions on the executive director's report? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and proceed to the next item, which I believe is the consent calendar. Actually, no, did we not? I'm sorry, hold on just a moment.
We'd have a public comment on the consent agenda, I believe.
Yeah, no, we didn't. We haven't done the consent calendar yet. Yeah, do we have any public comment on the consent agenda, which consists of items 7 through 11, which are minutes,
At this time, if a member of the public
an
wishes
annual
to,
audit engagement letter.
sorry, we have a bit of a delay. At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment on consent, you may press the raise hand button found on the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. Give it a minute. Okay, we have one for public comment.
Okay.
Give me 1 second, Janine.
Go ahead, Janine, when you're on.
Okay. I have a comment on the budget. I went over it last night and I was astounded.
Wait,
at-
Janine,
Yeah,
the budget is not one of the items on the consent agenda. That we're just talking about items 7 through 11 now, which are the minutes, the
Yeah.
annual audit.
yeah. Will I
the-
get a chance to address this later then?
I think you could address it probably when we talk about either
Okay.
item 12 or item 15.
Okay, perfect. We'll do that.
Let's tweak it in there. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, if there's no further public comment, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second,
Thank you. Let's please call the roll.
Ms. Marks,
Yes.
Mr. Enns,
yes.
Mr. Burbo.
Yes,
Motion passes unanimously.
thank you.
Thank you.
Um,
I'd just like to make a comment and point out that we are setting up for our annual audit. I think it's really timely, and I read I read the extensive report. It looks like CLA will do a good job for us.
And then I have one comment before we move forward on the executive committee meeting schedule, item number 11. Just a note for the public. We normally have our meetings on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Moving forward, please check the staff pages or reach out to us in person, or it will be updated on our website. They're going to be moving to Friday for October 1st, Friday for October 29th, and then interestingly enough, Monday for November 29th. Just an FYI.
And so the public understands, we need a little more time for staff to react to things between any action by the executive committee or any recommendations or direction from the executive committee and the fairly quick turnaround to publishing the final full board agenda. And this will allow for that additional time.
Excellent, thank you.
The difference, the odd one out is it's on Monday in November because to avoid Thanksgiving week. So, but thank you for bringing that up, Patty. Okay, let's go ahead and move on then to item number 12, review of the status of major contracts and RFPs. And we had asked for this because of, in discussion of our budgetary situation, we thought it would be sensible to look at some of our major contracts, especially some of those that have been out there.
President
long
Barbeau,
time.
did you want to take public comment on this
Anyway,
first, or?
I think what we'll do is, sure, let's go ahead and take public comment first. That's how we've typically done it.
At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment on item number 12, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I saw a hand, but then it lowered again. I'm going to give it a minute just in case that was a mistake.
I think this would be the appropriate place for Janine to make comment regarding the budget.
Yeah, give me 1 second. Okay, Janine, give me 1 second. Okay, Janine, you may, we're ready for you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Am I started?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm waiting in anticipation to find out the procedure of the county pulling out and how the 5 cities and whoever stays in, or the 6 cities, will fulfill the budget requirements of the list, the current expenses and the stuff that's prepared to be spent. I note the extraordinary expensive payroll and retirement items. And then I noticed this payment to AGM radio announcements. And I've never heard a radio announcement on this blue bin stuff. And particularly in Spanish, since I don't listen to Spanish radio, but which radio stations are these being played on? Do the public even know about that? Does it warrant spending that kind of money on a radio station that people might not even be listening to, instead of actual reaching out to people about that and putting blue bins in the parks where people can actually put their stuff in? The theater advertising, $700 every month. With COVID and our mask mandates being put on again, starting last night at midnight, it doesn't behoove us to be spending that kind of money in theaters. Again, I don't think people are going to go to the theater. So that's on the wall. Yeah, the layer broadcasting, Spanish radio again. But the huge issue that I want to address is the science discovery. In July, they got $19,894 for business sites, visits, and field work. On Sunday, I went to Atascadero and to pick up something, and it wasn't there. So I spent the remaining time visiting 3 of the retail outlets by grocery outlet. Dollar Tree has an extraordinary amount of polystyrene foam foodware, and also big lots. I talked to both managers. Neither of them knew there even wasn't an ordinance. I popped up the ordinance on my cell phone and showed them, and they said, "Oh, I guess we'll talk to corporate about it." I've talked to corporate. I've reached out to corporate in both of them. Why is it that the public is seeing that you, the IWMA, are not doing this work, and we find out? I have to have some answers. How are we going to pay and then pay these bills?
Janine,
Yeah.
3 minutes is up.
Yep, I see it.
All right. And thank you for the comments and the questions. I think you also, can submit questions in writing to staff. Well, some of your questions might be more readily addressed that way. And you can always copy board members on that when you do so that we have a chance to read about some of your concerns. Okay, Pat.
Okay, I'm getting a little lag in here, but I do want to review some of our major contracts. The reason being is that some of them are due for RFPs, and some of them I just want to make you aware of how large they are. Let's start off with our educational contract. Little background. Typically, the board approves this contract yearly based on the budget. When we bring it before, either in May, June, and then finally, of course, the approval for July. I want to ask you in this committee, and you're welcome to move it forward to the full board. Do you want to continue the same process, or would you like us to go out to RFP? Now, the reason I'm asking now is that we need to prepare to go out for RFP for the next fiscal year. Because of the size of this contract, we need to give the appropriate or winning vendor time, ample time to amp up to meet their obligations of the RFP if you choose to go that route. So I'm looking for feedback from the executive committee.
Patty, well, go ahead, Robert. It looks like you had a
Is
question.
this primarily the DeMilo contract?
It is entirely the DeMilo contract that we're talking here. It's science discovery. It's roughly about $500,000 a year. As you know, the majority of this funding is spent on SB 1383 one-on-one business outreach. They walk right in the front door. That's about $340,000 a year. And then the other portion of it is for the school programs. That also includes colleges and adult programs as well, Majority though is school programs for about 167,000 a year.
Patty, you said, I mean, the bulk of this 1383, which of course is a relatively new requirement. It is in the realm of education, although this is a 20-year-old contract, which always concerns me from a oversight, transparency, competition perspective.
Understood.
How much was this contract, let's say, a couple years ago before we were heavily involved in worrying about 1383 related implementation issues?
I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, and I hate to misquote it. I'd be happy to get the executive committee those numbers, as well as the full board. I could even begin from the beginning of the contract and give you how it progressed over time, because honestly, it has definitely expanded. The duties for science discovery has expanded over time. And again, more regulations coming down. AB 341, 1826,
Right.
SB
I just was trying to,
1383.
not specific numbers, but okay. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry to everybody. I'm having delay on my end too, so we're kind of, I apologize for interrupting. Jan, I do see you have a question, but I was just going to
Yes.
mention to Patty that, yeah, I was just trying to get the perspective that has it gotten considerably larger in the last couple of years because of 1383? And it sounds like maybe it has, you don't have the specifics on that, but
Yeah,
Jan,
and
go
I
ahead
can
with
get
your,
those for you.
okay, Jan, go ahead with your question.
I think a, a real problem with the contract is, and I have read it, is that it doesn't have an end date. The
That is
way
correct.
that, excuse me, what, Patty? Let
That
me
is
finish,
correct.
please. Okay, yeah, let me just finish, please, okay? It doesn't have an end date. And I think that I think that we need to consider renegotiating that contract, possibly putting out an RFP for another vendor, but also do an analysis of what job functions are actually being done, and in some way they should be evaluated. So I think that just approving the contract through the yearly budget process is not sufficient. I was brand new to the board when we approved the budget just before Brooke Stayers decided to go to Georgia. And I have to admit, I did not fully understand at that point that this was a 20-year-old kind of rolling obligation. We need to rein in that whole function and also look at how much we need to delegate and how much we need to actually do ourselves. So I would say this is something that does need to go to the full board. The timing of that, it might the bandwidth to do it, to wait until after the county has left, so we have a firmer sense of what our budgetary parameters are.
Hey, Patty, does the committee have an RFP process?
I'm sorry, when you say does the agency, the IWMA, have an RFP process? Yes,
Okay.
we have done RFPs in the past. Yes.
And you have a policy or a process?
Let me think. One moment.
I believe in the agenda packet,
Process.
Patty included a little bit about the normal process. She included that in the context with, I think, it would within the executive committee's approval level to approve the annual audit thing, but she actually did include a little bit about the process in there. I agree with all of Jan's concerns. I just, I think a 20-year-old, it's too long to go 20 years without putting a contract out there for opportunities for others. The scope has changed over the years. And I do agree that also it's, you don't rush out and do it right now. We have some ambiguity with the county's potential departure. We also have ambiguity with with Waste Connections asking us to vacate the education center. And so it's not something we need to put out an RFP in the immediate future, But I think certainly before we get to the next budget year, we should go through an RFP process for this contract. Robert, do you have any comments?
I have a couple. Number one, the cost of this educating people will be dictated out at the end when we're trying to meet the state requirements for reduction of food scraps going one place or another. I think that's spelled out in the state mandate. And you know, you spend some money to educate people, and then you have to evaluate, well, how did we do? And you won't know that until you get some results back. And then I think you can say, well, we can go up or down on our budget so that we can achieve the mandated requirements. So I'm curious how we can only at this time take a guess at it and evaluate later, how did we do? The other is this. Go ahead, Charles.
No, I apologize for interruption. I thought you were done. So go ahead and finish.
Well, the other one is I'm concerned about, first of all, if the county goes out, and Jan mentioned this, are they going to help pay for DeMilo to do stuff? Are they going to get somebody else? If we go to a school and make a presentation and IWMA is paying for that presentation, and are there students in the classroom that came out of the county? Do we send the county a bill per student for these types of things? I mean, it's going to get a little bit sticky as we move forward. And I'm curious how we think we're going to do that. And it all comes down to, where's the money? And I'm curious, I would think that the state of California, having made these requirements, might be creating some canned programs that would be available online on how to go about this or how to educate people. It seems like they have some responsibility to do that as well, that it shouldn't all fall on every local jurisdiction to meet all these requirements. And I had suggested sometime in the past that there was an opportunity if Mr. DeMilo wanted to be a superstar, he could be the guy that went to the state and created all these statewide programs, or take the ones that we've paid for and turn them into something that could be distributed statewide. But I think that if we think about those things, we need to think about what's the money trail that covers that. If IWMA is paying DeMilo to develop something and then he goes out and makes it a statewide deal and collects a lot more, who has the proprietary rights to that, to those documents and that program? So
Right.
anyway, those are my thoughts.
I understand. I know, Jan, I think you had a comment, but I want to comment first. Robert, you've raised a good point about the cost trail. I think this one might not be as complicated as some others relative to the county, because we wouldn't serve necessarily schools that are outside our remaining jurisdictions. But it brings up just yet another issue of, what will have to happen in terms of negotiations with the county.
Yes.
Our expectation, and I think would obviously be that they would pay for a certain amount of education if they wanted to participate with DeMilo and not just go out and do one of their own. Jan, go ahead, your comment, and then I have a comment about another comment about this.
Okay, well, I don't want to skip around in terms of our agenda items, but just want to point out that in terms of the estimate of the cost of education regarding 1383, and this is the estimate that was made by the consultant HF&H, who advised Brooke Stayers just before he suddenly left, is $425,000. Now that's been baked into our 218 rate increase, we don't know um, in terms of the entire education budget, we don't really know to what extent 1383 would even be a separate, how do I say, a separate program. Let's just say, you're going to an elementary school or a high school, you just be mentioning yada, yada, all the 3 or 4 programs that we have, and there's 1383. So you're kind of there already. So I don't know if that, we just need to, and I am skipping down to the new request for proposal, conduct an in-depth fiscal analysis regarding the cost of SB 1383. I
Okay,
think, and this is all related, but I think that rather than getting too far into the implementation weeds, we need to pull back a little bit and just really talk about the budgetary analysis and make sure that we've got the data we need to move forward, which I don't think we have right now.
okay, thank you, Jan. One of the thing I was going to mention though is, one of the reasons we put this stuff on the agenda was to talk about the status of our major contracts in light of our short-term revenue shortfall. And so part of that for me is the question to Patty on this contract in particular is there anything about this contract in the near term that can be scaled back, temporarily suspended, et cetera, in order to save costs in the short term, and that being a separate budgetary concern from the
Yes.
longer term financial management piece of it, which is going out to rebid it because that makes good governance sense. So are there things that you would look at doing to try to curtail costs under this particular contract in this particular arena?
Yes, there are.
And do you want to, I don't know, I mean, is that something that we as an executive committee and a full board want you to present a list of? So we go, yeah, it makes sense to cut back on those things. So we know what it is that would be curtailed.
Yeah, we can definitely do that for you. I've sat down with Mike DeMilo on both contracts or both segments, the school education and the business. And we've had in-depth discussions on both. So, excuse me for coughing. I'd be happy to share that with the executive committee.
Okay, well, if you have that, or you could share it now, or does the executive committee just think you should present that to the full board next week? So Jan or Robert, what do you think?
Well, my observation is that when we were in the COVID business, they couldn't go to the schools. The schools didn't go to schools. I think we learned something there. I'm assuming that it's more cost effective to Zoom to schools than it is to drive to them and make physical presentations. I'm suspecting that's why part of the impetus to remove our room at Cold Canyon, I think we're headed in a different direction here. And I'm guessing there's got to be more cost effective to stay with a digital program of some kind. And, so I think if Patty can talk to Mike and, what can we do to trim our budget down?
Absolutely.
But do you think then it'd just be okay for Patty to present that next week to the full board? And just so the full board understands that we're going to be temporarily curtailing some services? Go ahead, Jan. Or Robert, go ahead, and then Jan.
I would encourage Patty to do that on, all the things that she can. It looks like, this thing with the county is going to have long-reaching impacts, and I don't know that we can even guess what they are right now. So we need to be as conservative as
We can't.
with
That's
our
true.
budget.
Go ahead, Jan.
Yeah, I think what would make sense, rather than try to do it orally right now, especially since we're in a time squeeze, would be for Patty to do a memo and certainly start with the science discovery education budget and then anything else in terms of, I think the items that Janine Rance brought up, the idea of having advertisements in movie theaters when movie theaters are going to be empty because of the COVID, or the bulletin boards, these extraneous forms of advertising that are expensive. If we haven't already contracted, if we're not already contractually obliged to pay for them, I think we need to basically tighten our belt and cut back our expenses, at least in the short term, so that given the uncertainty of what we're facing right now, there are also expenses that have to do with the permanent executive director, we'll talk about this later, that can be vastly reduced because we don't have a permanent executive director. So just to go through the various budget items and make recommendations, I think that would be very helpful. And if that memo could be sent individually as a transmittal, possibly through our attorney, to each of the members of the executive committee prior to it being presented to the entire board, I think that would be helpful so that we're oriented when we go into that September 8th meeting.
Okay, so thank you, Jen. Are you, and I kind of like that idea, essentially, if I understand you correctly, having Patty come, have a written item on the September 8th agenda, maybe send it to the executive committee ahead of time, but, it would be out published fairly quickly anyway. If Patty, if you could do that and say, okay, here's a list of things in these various contracts or other expenses that we could cut in the short term to achieve short-term savings. Is that something you could generate in time for next week's meeting? Because I think that would be great if you could.
It's a little bit short notice, and I don't mean to talk over anyone if I am, but it's a little bit short notice to get that all together and do an agenda item, given we're supposed to have that out 7 days in advance of that meeting. Not impossible. I'll see what I can do.
Right.
And then and I'm sorry I don't mean to
Okay.
talk over anyone. Just to be clear, we are not doing billboard advertising. Once again, just to be clear, no billboard advertising. We are, however, doing theater advertising. And unfortunately, we looked into the contracts. If we stop that, we still have to pay for it. So unfortunately, that's where we are with the theaters, just for clarity. But I will look at every single line item, see what we can cut back on, and have done so already with Barbara. So we're fully prepared to put that together in a memo. Again, if I understand you correctly, you want the executive committee to see it via the legal counsel first, and then we'll try working with Linda Sommer-Smith to make sure that there's a line item on the next board meeting.
Yeah.
Have I missed anything?
Well, yes, Patty. What I would say is do your best, and then it's my understanding that with 72 hour that an agenda can be amended with 72-hour notice under the Brown Act. So we may need to amend the agenda, if that 7-day window, which we're trying to lengthen in the future, is too short. But personally, I'd say just do your best, and then if you have to amend the staff report later, do it within the 72-hour time limit.
Understood.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't think, you put the item on the agenda, do your best. I don't expect this to be so comprehensive that you don't come up with something else in a subsequent meeting. And I don't understand though why we need to send it through council. I mean, it's just it's a staff report. It's going to come out in a couple. The initial version will be out in a couple of days. It could be changed, as you noted, if additional information is added. So I'm not sure why we need to go to council.
I think that there's just an issue of discussing things amongst themselves. As long as it's just sent and you're not, replying back or asking for things to be added amongst yourselves, it's fine. It doesn't need to go through me. But if you're going to start using it as a collaborative, corrective document, then
Right. and we don't do that, which frankly is, I mean, sometimes makes it harder to set good policy because we can only talk about it together in these settings, but we all comply with that. And so, yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. So I don't think it, needs to go through you. Okay, very good. I think that's good guidance. And let's see, so in that respect, though, we had a couple of other contracts on your list, Patty. I don't, we probably don't need to dive too deeply into that because we are going to ask you to, provide the same context about in terms of short-term cuts. But do we want to discuss those? I'm looking at the fellow board members about the status of those other contracts on the list that Patty provided. Or Patty, do you have commentary you'd like to make on those?
Just really quick on the annual audit, as you know, and Jan already mentioned that it will be ending, the contract with CLA will be ending soon. So we will be going out for RFP on that one. Again, legal counsel, we have a similar contract to the Mike DeMilo contract. It's approved through the yearly budget process. Again, preparing for the next fiscal year, are you interested in having the IWMA do an RFP, or would you like to continue with the same renewal method?
I'd
Open to
recommend
comments.
an RFP every 3 years at least for legal services. Yeah, I mean, I would think that would be standard practice that you should do that.
Say that again, Linda.
I think you should be reviewing legal counsel through an RFP process on some type of regular schedule. It doesn't have to be annually, but it's definitely something to consider.
I agree. I think it would make sense to do it possibly on a 3-year schedule, just for continuity. And of course, our present counsel would be more than welcome to apply through that RFP process. And Linda, I just want to say your when you speak, it's kind of echoey. So if you can direct your speech more toward your microphone and maybe speak up a little bit, it will be easier to hear. Is anybody else having that problem? Or is it just me?
Sure, I'll do that.
Thank you.
I'm having little problems with people breaking up, everybody. And so I'm kind of assuming that's my computer or my bandwidth. But I'm having little breakups here and there and occasionally having a hard time hearing certain words. But I'm assuming that's on my end. Maybe it's not if you're experiencing the same things. I agree. I think that 3 to 5 years, and we've had the same legal counsel for many years. And that maybe it was redone a few times and they just, kept getting it. I think it's always good to put these things out for RFP periodically, and that, so that in the course of the next year, we look at doing that.
Thank you for your guidance on that. Moving on to hazardous waste. Now, again, this contract doesn't end until June 30th, 2023, but it is a large contract, given that $50,000 in disposal and safe management of the chemicals that we collect at our 6 facilities alone is the bulk of that contract. So just not that you need to focus on it now, but just an FYI, this is on the back burner. Sometime next year, we'll be developing an RFP for that. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Patty. I did have one, I don't want to go back, but in the on the DeMilo contract, it said in there that the scope of work was in Appendix B and Appendix A and or Attachment A or whatever, and I didn't see that because then it jumped to the CLA contract. I would like to see that scope of work at some point.
Okay, we can make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any other issues on that agenda item then?
Yeah, the 2 new ones.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
That's
go ahead.
huge, in my opinion. I think we need to have both of them, both conduct an in-depth fiscal analysis regarding the cost of SB 1383 implementation, and also the second one, the economic impact of the county withdrawal on the IWMA and individual jurisdictions.
Yeah.
We haven't officially gotten a withdrawal date from them yet, but as the county staff member mentioned that possibly it would be coming up in mid-October. So
Thank you,
I think we need them both.
Jen.
Yeah.
I apologize. I kind of missed the boat on that. Yeah, the,
So
So
just, we
that's-
are gonna talk about this in conjunction with 15, because
Okay,
they're intertwined, and I don't know if you want to wait until that, or, I mean, I don't think we should, we definitely need to address it, but
Yeah.
Charles, it's up to you.
no, I apologize. I just missed the boat on that. You know, I knew we were going to be talking about this RFP thing. It's here on the agenda, so I think we should talk about it in conjunction with this agenda item. That's where it's printed. So anyway, Jen, you're the one that had proposed this. You know, I think I know your thoughts on it, but is there anything else you'd like to add on it before Robert and I comment?
oh, okay. Well, conducting the end of fiscal analysis regarding the cost, we touched on that briefly when we talked about the science discovery contract. And, you know, it's just unclear at this point that the figures that we were given, education, $425,000, compliance monitoring, $6,000 and $1,200, contamination management, $33,000, and required reporting and data management, $95,000. So the total cost of meeting state mandates, $1,165,000. And that's the basis on which we have asked for these rate increases. So I just feel that we need to have some verification of the accuracy of these estimates. So that's why I think we do need to have that. If one RFP can handle both of these subjects, that'd be great. The second one is the economic impact of the county withdrawal on the IWMA and individual jurisdictions. The county's MSW analysis only looked at the financial effect on the county itself in terms of its withdrawal, and not the economic impact on our organization, the IWMA, or on the individual jurisdictions. And again, I was at a mayor's meeting as a resource, and Paso Robles Mayor Steve Martin was adamant that he needed that. And I've heard from certain other jurisdictions that they need that information. So in my opinion, I think we should go forward with both of them and work, maybe perhaps appoint a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee to actually flesh out what it is in specifics that we would want to have in that RFP.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jen. I mean, I have concerns about this, and that is, I think the problem is we would be asking a consultant to define the unknowable. Because a lot of this is nobody's going to know the answer to this. Nobody's going to be able to apply numbers to this until we kind of figure out where things are going with the county. We know the county wants to leave, and that's about the only thing we know for certainty. You know, because we don't know what effect this might have on some of our cost structure, because the county might turn around and say, hey, you know, certainly in the short run, can you continue to do this? Because they're not, you know, they've jumped off the cliff and they're not ready to do, or they're about to jump off the cliff formally, I guess. They're not ready to do many of these things. We're not sure what the long-term arrangements will be here. And I'm not sure what a consultant, you know, spending money on, put out an RFP and spending money on a consultant would actually be able to tell us. We had a consultant, you know, our existing consultant, come up with these numbers in terms of 1383 implementation costs. We had staff in the form of Brooks, Patty, assuming Barbara, you know, work on some of these numbers and coming forward with the rate increase. And I'm kind of drifting into the other agenda item. I'd certainly like to get Patty's thoughts on the degree to which they would just need to modify some of that work. But my concern is that we'd be spending money on paying somebody to try to discern the unknowable. And that some of this is just gonna have to be ironed out with the county. And, you know, I don't know, I'm kind of questioning what the value to be achieved here
Mhm.
is, you know, through this sort of consultancy contract. So I'm interested, I understand your premise, Jan. I'm interested in what Robert has to say.
Okay, thank you, Charles. One, I understand, Jan, what your concerns are and why you would make this request, but I wholly agree with Charles that no one knows right now on either of these. The HF&H consultant, I think, did the best job he could to give us some numbers to go by for a year. Again, we really won't know what the cost is until we've had a year's worth of experience trying to do this. And I'm not afraid of budgets if they're just a number on a line and you go through the year and you come out at the end of the year and then you say, okay, here's what I thought it was. Here's what it actually was, and we'll make the adjustment in the following year. The thing about the county going out, I spoke with our manager at Cayuga Sanitary District this morning. And with Peter pulling out of, going with the county, and again, my guess is we know right where he's going. Until the county decides what they're doing, maybe they'll do it cheaper. Nobody's talked to us about, do we get a franchise fee from the county if we go with the county? There's a number of unknowns here that are just astronomical in terms of trying to guess what's going to happen. So at this point, I think we're still in a hide and watch mode until we can really let the county do what they want to do. And this hiring of Peter just tells me that they're adamant about leaving. So I think they're going down the road. Those are my thoughts.
Can I
Okay.
please address those concerns?
Sure. Well, go
Okay.
ahead, Jan. I was gonna say something. Go ahead.
Well, you wanted me to, you wanted to hear from Robert. Now you're going to hear from me. Okay. Or do you want to go first? It's up to you. You're the chair.
Well, let me suggest this, Jan. Let me tell you what my thought is, and then you can decide how much more you want to say about it. I think in terms of our action, I would suggest that maybe we just leave this on the agenda for next week and get the full board's input on this and that. Rather than us coming forward, let's say a recommendation to do it or not do it, that we bring it to the full board and discuss it with the full board.
Okay, I'm going to address this briefly. If the IWMA does not do the analysis, that would tell the jurisdictions different scenarios, different options. In other words, a consultant can say, scenario 1, this happens. Scenario 2, that happens. Scenario 3, this happens. If the IWMA does not take that responsibility and do our best to inform the jurisdictions about the economic impact on them, what that's going to do is throw it back to the jurisdiction so that each city will have to do it for itself. Each CSD is going to have to do it for itself. And I really feel that it would not be fair to them. And also it would give a signal that the IWMA is not going to actually perform a stewardship role in terms of that. We know from reading the MSW report that the folks in their jurisdiction are going to have somewhere between 10 and 15% increase in their rates. We know that from the MSW report, okay? We don't know what effect the county withdrawal will have on the rates of the people in the urban part of the county. And I think that it may be something that is unknowable. So, possibly a wait and see attitude might, practically speaking, be a good thing to do. On the other hand, we have just decided in June to do a rate increase based on data that may or may not be accurate. And that's my concern. So, you know, if we take this question to the entire board, we could do that. You know, but to me, we have a responsibility to inform the jurisdictions about what's going to happen to them. They don't know. There's a lot of confusion and anxiety out there. So I would say that, you know, I would say let's do an RFP, and we might decide to go with MSW. They already did the county work. And, you know, so that they have a lot of information, or to ask them to flesh out the rest of the picture. But, you know, if it were an RFP, it'd be open to various consultants.
Okay.
So that's what I have to say about that. You
Okay.
guys can decide.
Okay, I think
There's two of you and one of me.
right,
So.
and so I think, Jen, that you know, that today, two of us anyway aren't prepared to say let's proceed with that. I think it'd be best to go ahead and discuss it with the full board. I would also ask, though, as part of that Patty be prepared to address, or I'm also concerned about why we wouldn't just use our existing consultant and our staff who came up with both the rate increase recommendations and the existing cost analysis for 1383 implementation. Why we would go out and do a separate RFP and not just have them do that. So I'd like, when it comes back next week, for Patty, if you could be in a situation to try to address that as part of the discussion, the capability of staff and our existing consultant to try to answer a couple of these questions.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Is
I think,
our existing
you know, it would be
consultants on retainer, or is it an item by item arrangement?
At this point in time, it's
Another-
item by item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think, though, that for purposes of today, we're not going to agree to take any specific action, so we'll bring it back on full board for discussion.
Okay.
Okay, does that wrap up our discussion on agenda item 12? I think so. We're going to move to item 13, which is our direction for future meeting format. You know, I had asked for this to be put on the agenda in anticipation that the state of emergency in California that was set to expire September 15th we're actually, you know, regressing with the counties, you know, putting us back in, you know, where mask indoors, et cetera, public health order yesterday. So I think for the time being, we can think about it, but there's really no reason to enter into in-depth discussion, because I think for the next couple months, at least, we're going to be in Zoom mode for both, for the full board meetings. Does anybody see a need to discuss that further at this point in time?
President Barber,
No.
could I jump in?
Sure.
Really quick, I just wanted to drop one other thing in there, just so that everybody has it in the back of their minds and so there's no surprise. As it stands, and we're trying to get it in writing, if the county exits, and it looks like they are going to exit from the JPA, we will, moving forward, not be able to use the board chambers for our in-person meetings. Now, again, I'm still trying to get that in writing. It looks as though staff is leaning in that direction. So for in-purpose meetings down the road, we may need to get creative and possibly use city chambers, rotate chambers. We will definitely, if staff stands behind their decision, we will have to look for a new meeting room. Just an
Sure.
FYI.
Sure. No, I understand. And there's the library community room where bodies periodically hold meetings. I just think, yeah, it's good to know that, but you guys can address that as we move down the road. You can be looking for alternative spots, as potential meeting spaces.
Thank you.
So in terms
Okay,
of
thank you.
direction,
We
in
have any-
terms of direction, we're just saying, for now, let's stick to Zoom, and then if things change, we will adjust accordingly. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
good.
So our recommendation of the full board is that we just stick with Zoom meetings for the full board meetings, and we'll adjust accordingly down the road when hopefully things are better. And in the meantime, staff will consider our potential long-term options for meeting places. Okay, is there any public comment on item 13? This is a location of, our future meetings.
At this time, if a member of the public wishes to make comment on item number 13, you may hit the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press star 9. I don't see anybody for public comment.
Okay, then we'll move on to item 14, which is the status of our JPA amendment versus draft model ordinance language to facilitate implementation of SB 1383. And I asked for this to be on the agenda, mostly because I want to make sure that we keep the full board informed of the status of this. You may recall in June, we passed an amendment to the Joint Powers Agreement. And the purpose of that amendment was to, it was recommended by our consultant and staff, and the purpose was to enable the IWMA, which was not specific, JPA is not specifically mentioned in the 1383 legislation. It was designed to say that the JPA empowered the IWMA to do certain 1383 things related to 1383. The county board of supervisors majority objected to that because of the language in there that it granted additional powers to the JPA. And as our council pointed out, if that was sent out then for ratification by each of the member jurisdictions, the county would decline to ratify it, and therefore, it would, lack the unanimous approval that's called for under, rules for amending the JPA. In consequence of that, the staff, and consultant, and the council legal counsel came up with the thought process of, well, in these draft model ordinances that are being worked on and presented to each jurisdiction for ensuring their ordinances are updated to comply with 1383, it could just be written in each of those ordinances that each jurisdiction, one at a time, in updating their ordinance, was authorizing the IWMA to perform certain functions to comply with 1383. That made a lot of sense to me. I just want to make sure that the full board is aware of why we haven't sent the JPA Amendment 2 formally distributed it around the county for ratification. And that this alternative approach will address the need to authorize the IWMA to carry out certain 1383 required functions just on an individual jurisdiction basis. Now, so I'm going to ask Patty and Linda if I've adequately explained that, and then see if Robert have questions or comments.
And I don't mean to jump in on top of you, Linda, but just one more point of clarification. It has in these ordinances, model ordinances, and again, it's based on whatever city and or the county at this point in time, or the special districts want to add or not. The IWMA can be delegated duties, but not necessarily do they have to be delegated duties. So what's great about these model ordinances is that they provide optionality for a special district or city and or the county to either delegate or not to the IWMA or delegate to another party.
Yeah, I don't have any comments. I mean, that's accurate.
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, I have a question for council. Well, we already amended the JPA. It was done by a majority, except for 3 supervisors. Everybody else said yes. So what would be the procedure to undo the amendment to the JPA that we just passed? And what effect would that have strategically or otherwise? Or can we just leave it there? What is it that we need to do next?
Well, that's kind of why I put it on the agenda is we need to publicly say, we're not going to disseminate this, thing for ratification, and let it die in effect. So yeah, that's the kind of question to council.
Well, I mean, you should take action to do that. I don't think you should just let it die, because I think that leaves everything in limbo. So I would put it as an action item. And leave it at that. So I'd bring this back up.
Does that answer your question, Jan? Robert?
Well, what would the action be if it's an action item? So then we would have to rescind the the amendment, or what?
Yeah.
What would we need to do?
Yeah, you'd rescind the amendment.
Okay,
I don't know how many people signed it.
everybody except the 3 supervisors.
Well, no, you mean, Jan, you're saying everybody voted for it, which is actually not accurate. Paso didn't vote in favor of that resolution.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. My memory was that it was
I don't
everyone else.
believe they did. I don't believe they did, but I want, I guess, Patty then to clarify, but that's just the vote at the board. We did not send it around then, for each body, full city council and, CSD to vote on and approve it as a JPA amendment. And that's my concern, is that, like you said, Jan, we've done an action. The normal follow-on action would have been to transmit that to the jurisdictions and say, please ratify this. And if we're not going to, I don't believe we did that, that we never formally distributed it, and that, we shouldn't leave it out there. We probably, we should take an action that says, okay, in light of the circumstances, and this alternative approach of the model ordinances, we're going to rescind this amendment, not distribute it, and recommend to councils that they or the jurisdictions that they achieve the same thing through adopting an ordinance.
Which in itself is an action. So I would think rescission and then a different proposal. We're just recommending that model ordinance concept.
And Linda, would we have to formally rescind it, or could we just decide not to distribute it, not to
I would
pass it?
formally rescind it. It was an action taken. I think, again, you've got you've got minute documentation that you need to address.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Robert, did you have a comment? I'm sorry, Jan.
agree. Oh, go ahead. No, well, I was just going to say that it would make sense to, I think, bring up the idea of the model ordinance first and as an agenda item, and then the next agenda item would be rescission. So we wouldn't be asking people to the board to approve rescission of that amendment before they knew what the alternatives were, so that it's not, you see what I'm saying? So there's a orderly
Thank you. I would stick,
progression of thought.
right. I think it could be a single agenda item, but perhaps the first, it could be stated in such a sense that the first recommendation is that the IWMA board recommends the jurisdictions that they adopt ordinances enabling the IWMA to perform, certain 1383 functions on their behalf. And, if the board agrees to make that recommendation, then we recommend we rescind JPA Amendment 2.
So I have a question about
that-
the timing. Would it be better to wait until the county has actually withdrawn to do that? Rather
I would,
than,
yeah.
rather
would
than
be-
doing it ahead of time?
Right. I would be perfectly okay with not putting it on the September 8th agenda, but putting it on like the October agenda, where there will at least be, by that point, we should have the county's formal withdrawal.
I think that would make sense so that it's not, just so that people are not confused. So
Understand.
that, you know,
Yeah, no, I understand, Jan. Robert, do you have any comment?
No, I just agree with that. It's premature to decide what to do with this thing right now until we know what the county wants to do.
Well, we know they don't want to approve JPA Amendment 2. But,
Indeed, they don't.
okay, yeah, got it. I think that's something we could do in October, but everybody needs to recognize that staff is proceeding with developing, with the model.
That is
ordinances
correct.
That does contain this language. So, that's fine. Okay, all righty,
Okay,
enough.
before we move
said.
on, I'm sorry, for clarification, moving to October agenda, and it's one agenda item only, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And do we need a formal motion for that?
I don't know, it's guidance to staff. Do we need a motion? I mean, we're not
No.
taking, we're just recommending
I just as soon make a motion if
that we bring it back as an
helps,
agenda item.
helps everybody feel secure in what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, especially since we are rescinding. Mr. Burbo, would you please, for the record, help me with that motion, please?
Okay, well, in the form of a motion, I'm moving that we bring back on the October meeting for the full board agenda a discussion of the draft model ordinances, which would empower, or we would recommend to the full board that we recommend to the jurisdictions that they adopt ordinances that enable the IWMA carry out 1383 responsibilities on their behalf where applicable. And that in consequence of that, we recommend rescinding JPA Amendment 2.
Rescinding the approval.
Rescinding, the approval of JPA Amendment 2.
Okay, great. I do have that written down. Did you want to go ahead and take public comment before we do a roll call vote on that
Yes.
motion?
Yes, is there any public comment on this? It's on agenda item
Member
14.
of the public has comment on item number 14. You may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press star 9. I am not seeing anybody for public comment.
Okay, then go ahead and do the
well, wait a second. I want to make the motion.
roll call.
I move.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
move whatever.
I moved. I needed a second. You
I
second.
need. Okay, I'll second it.
Okay, so
I was
motion
going to say
by,
whatever he said, but
yeah.
okay.
Motion by me, second by Jan. Go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Burbo,
Yes.
Ms. Mark,
Yes.
Mr. Enns,
Yes,
motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. And we will move on to item 15, our discussion of our SB 1383 fee increases and the implications of Prop 218.
So at this point in time, I'd like to, based on earlier
Patty,
discussions.
I'm not sure if this was you or legal counsel. I know we
Yeah,
do have
based on,
legal- Go ahead.
I'm sorry, based on earlier discussions, I'll yield the floor to legal counsel.
Well, so this item has been going back and forth in the last few meetings, and it's become a sore spot. The question is whether or not to implement the increase based on the information at this time, which is supposed to go into effect on October 1st, or whether the information needs to be updated, which goes back to Jan's request for the RFP. If you look at the HF&H report and the way it's crafted, in our opinion, it's sufficient in its language and its calculations, both in terms of it being an estimate of fees and also its limitations, that you could continue to go forward with this report if staff so directs. So if staff were to go back through this report and say that the assumptions are still valid, it could be adopted and be implemented as of October 1st, pursuant to the action that's already been taken. So my recommendation would be to take action by the executive committee to direct the staff to prepare a report to the full board as to whether or not they can go forward to recommend implementation. And just go forward. I mean, it's self-limiting in terms of the revenue that'll come in, because the revenue is going to be tipping fees and increases. So there's going to be reduced revenue and there's probably going to be reduced cost, but those should offset each other based on the methodology that was used in the report. So I think that's really something that the EC should take action on today to direct the full board.
Okay, I have a question, and I'm sure Jan and Robert might as well. For me, the concern here is, we passed this rate resolution. Jeff Minery, as our legal counsel, disseminated it out to the jurisdictions saying, hey, jurisdictions, IWMA passed this rate resolution, and you, the individual jurisdictions, need to judge whether you need to do a 218. My concern is, of course, is twofold. One, the city of San Luis Obispo gave us the formal request to delay, which in the rate resolution, we empowered the executive director to consider that delay, and their request was based on they only like to do 218 once a year. As far as I know, we've heard nothing from any of the other jurisdictions, so that no jurisdictions, including mine, has even agendized this issue
Agendize the 218.
For discussion, which means that the haulers, unless we were to assert that that we impose this fee on the haulers and they're supposed to collect it, this, in the absence of clarification from the jurisdictions, the haulers aren't going to collect the revenue. We're not going to get any additional revenue. So my question, part of me wants to, stay on track, but we need to clarify with the jurisdictions, what are they doing and when are they going to proceed? Jan's brought up the issue of, is the number right because of potential changes in, with the county and other things. I'm comfortable enough that that the number is right is close enough to right for the time being. But I guess the alternative, what I'm would try to understand is, what is the option? Because I've understood from council that we as a body have the authority to implement these fees or impose them. But, could we run our own 218 and, if necessary, hire an outside party, an expert in these things to help run the 218?
And my recommendation, and I know this isn't the popular opinion, but is not to have the IWMA run the 218. It's never run them in the past.
Right.
We don't have the information necessary. We would have to have the staff in coordination with each jurisdiction to get that information. And I think it's, if the jurisdictions want to do it in conjunction with their own separate 218s, what they routinely run, it's just more efficient. I think it's confusing for the IWMA to do it. At this point, I just don't think the staff can, with all that's going on. It can impose it, and then the cities and other jurisdictions can decide whether or not to, I guess, absorb that fee or go to their various agreements with the haulers and oppose it on them. But in the end, the revenue will come into the IWMA if you go ahead and on October 1st and go forward. My concern with the 218, I shouldn't say mine, our concern with the 218 is if we wait for each jurisdiction to decide, it may decide it doesn't have sufficient information and it may wait another year. So I don't think you can assume that 218 should dictate whether or not you go forward. If your numbers are accurate and you're comfortable in those numbers, again, it's a range of numbers that are tied to revenue and cost, then you should adopt that and go forward.
Well, okay, so Linda, when you say go forward, though, we passed the rate resolution.
Mm-hmm.
We informed the jurisdictions. We don't have any direct relationship with haulers, but Patty, I'm not sure if we've sent information to the haulers. They're certainly aware of it. It was public action, but I'm not sure we sent it to the haulers. And technically our rate imposes the rate on the haulers, who in turn want to impose it on the customers. But of course, we have no direct business relationship with the haulers. The jurisdictions are the ones that hold the franchise agreements. And so that's why it's a little bit convoluted. My concern, though, Linda, then is what do you mean by go ahead with implementing it?
Well, you'd impose the rate indirectly on the city, on the jurisdictions, which would either absorb it or pay, the haulers would pay the rate. Implementing it would be October 1st, the rates go up, the tipping fees go up, that's automatic. They would pay that at the site.
All right. Okay, let's see what Jan has to say there.
Well, I'd just like to back up a little bit and support what Linda Summersmith was saying. I do not think that that the IWMA should do a 218. As she pointed out, we haven't done it before. And I think that all of the jurisdictions have done it. And I believe that the haulers also have to do it. So I think that I'd like to just to see if we can get some agreement on that we're not going to, that the IWMA is not going to do a 218. Is that, do we need to take that to the whole board, or is this sufficient for the executive committee to make that decision?
Well, I don't think you have to take it to the board, because you take it to the board if you wanted to do it.
Got it. Okay. So as to the other thing, if staff did review the consultant's recommendations with a budget cutting pencil in mind, I'm not sure that they would actually be able to come up with much data without further analysis from the consultant. So if we've decided not to do an RFP for an in-depth fiscal analysis, including the 1383, if we decided not to go that way at this point, then we would just rely on the figures that are out there and proceed. And I think that at least would create some certainty. And as I said before, there's a lot of confusion out there. So I think that would make sense, and then leave it up to the executive director or the acting executive director whom we've authorized to communicate with the city of San Luis Obispo about whether or not an extension is possible. I just checked our city agenda, and it's not on the September 7th agenda. The 218 item is not on the September 7th agenda. So the next meeting would be like September 29th or so. So they're getting really close to the October 1st deadline. I'm not sure what's going on there. And although I represent the city of San Luis Obispo, I would be very happy to have to delegate that to staff, that negotiation.
Thank you, Jan. I think for me, actually, city of San Luis Obispo is the only one we have any clarity on what's happening with, because they're the only one that's formally responded by saying, hey, we want to wait and do this in conjunction with our annual 218 process. So I think in that sense, they're the only ones we have definition from, because we, as far as I know, Patty can correct me if I'm wrong, we've not heard from any of the
Charles,
other
and
jurisdictions. And as far as I know, none of them have scheduled this item for discussion. Is that correct?
so I have spoken to several jurisdictions, and there's some creative options out there. Many have taken the side of, if the IWMA imposes this in October, what we'll do is we'll just take it out of our franchise fees until January. So where we can be whole. So, and again, that's just one option in a multiple. I mean, people are really trying to think out of the box here. They're really trying hard to work with us on this, but nothing in writing.
Okay,
You are
and
correct on that.
I'll certainly concede. Okay, thank you. And I'll certainly agree that, after discussion, it's not, it wouldn't be a wise thing for us to attempt a 218 situation or to run a 218 process ourselves. I'm just concerned about 1 October. We've passed a rate resolution. We said this rate is imposed on all haulers who have a, agreement, who hold a franchise in our jurisdiction area. what do we do when they don't collect and remit the money? And we haven't heard anything from the jurisdiction about them scheduling a 218 hearing, because some of the haulers are going to go, okay, I'll collect it, and I'm going to go to my jurisdiction and say, you know, you got to give me a rate increase to cover this. Others will say, I'm not going to collect this until my jurisdiction gives me a rate increase to cover it. In which case, we're dependent on the jurisdiction scheduling and running a 218 process. How do we help move that along, I guess, would be the question.
Well, I think part of it is you have to have it in conjunction with your budget, right? So if you're going to do some significant cutting and comply where you can with the SB 1383 implementation, maybe you take a more, measured approach and say, okay, we're going to allow everybody to start communicating on this and implement it January 1st. I mean, I guess you'd have to take action to do that because you've implemented it as of October 1st. And then give everybody time sort of to absorb it. But, if you do that, you've got to do the corollary, which is use reserves or make cuts or both.
Yeah. Would it behoove us, going back to what Jan said, to have basically have staff, ensure that staff contacts all the jurisdictions and say, where are you guys at on this? Or we maybe even put it in writing, either from Patty or from council, and say, where are you at on him determining whether you're going to do a 218 and doing a 218 process. I'd like to kind of put some written notice out there that we as an agency want to know where these other agencies are at. And then Robert, you had a comment.
Yeah, and also add that the IWMA is not doing it. So again, this question of uncertainty, let them know the IWMA is not going to be doing a regional 218. Therefore, it's up to each of those jurisdictions. Please respond in writing. Tell us what your plans are at this point, something like that. If we could afford to move the whole thing back to January 1st, I think that would make sense in that by that time the county would have withdrawn, and then we would have greater clarity about our enforcement responsibilities and our education responsibilities, as opposed to October 1st, and the county apparently, from what we've heard, will be officially out of there by October 14th. So
Thank you.
I don't
Robert?
know.
Okay, I'm not clear on when the county.
Robert, you had comment?
Yes, I'm not clear on whether if this October 14th date is in caps and stone. That's fine. One, I agree, Linda, thank you very much. I thought your recommendations were excellent. That the F&H report is sufficient to give us the data we need. We need to take action and send this to the full board, we the executive committee. I agree with everybody that we're not doing the IWMA is not doing the 218. And finally, if there's enough cash income to keep the IWMA afloat until January, we could hold off on on these rate increases till January. But if they're scheduled for October, and I know the haulers could take the money out of the franchise fee, that would have to be agreeable with each jurisdiction, but that's really where the interim money could come from. And you could recapture that, whatever the 3 months worth of franchise fee loss, you could recapture that in your 218. So you'd get your money back, just be delayed 3 months. So I think we should move forward and put this on the agenda.
All right. And I think, I'd rather not formally change anything to January, because as a practical matter, we have in the existing rate resolution allowing the jurisdictions to request a delay, but that we proceed as if, hey, we passed the rate resolution. This is our expectation. We're going to follow up. We recommend to the full board that we follow up in writing with the jurisdictions on where they're at. And we could copy, those letters to the haulers as well as a reminder that, we impose this fee on the haulers and we're, expecting it to be collected. So maybe we, reprise this discussion next week with an emphasis on that, we don't think that the IWMA should do a 218, and that we need to just do some follow-up to get our rate resolution implemented.
I'm
Okay.
good with that, Charles.
Ann, does that work for you?
Yes,
And is that clear to council and staff then?
Yeah, what I don't know though is the agenda item for the full board is just that we're implementing what was already voted on, right? And we just, the only difference is maybe communication.
It's
Right.
just, be just an update.
well, yeah, well, the communication is that we're not doing the a regional 218,
Right.
that it's up to the jurisdictions, that if the jurisdictions want to make any adjustments to the timeline, they need to make such requests in writing, and give them a deadline by a certain date.
Right.
Maybe, September 7th or something. And then if we don't hear back, the default is they're going to go ahead with the process. The problem is that the timeline is such for the 218 that they have to have already put it on their agenda in order to meet that deadline.
Right. I mean, because of the 45-day noticing and all that stuff,
Yeah.
we're that's why I'm kind of looking at these city council agendas and saying, they're not talking about it, and which puts
Right.
their 218 process out there. But through some sort of communication here, we could point out we could perhaps also point out to them the options that Robert talked about, that the hauler could charge it to the customer, and not really charge the customer, could pay it to us and expect it to be their jurisdiction to make it up in an amendment to the hauler agreement. Okay, so I think we'll talk about it next week, but if council and staff could
Okay.
possibly come up with a letter, for discussion that would go out, that would be intended to go out to the jurisdictions.
Yeah, Patty, you're gonna have a lot on your plate between now and tomorrow or the end of the day. So
Agreed.
we can work with you on that letter and the staff report on this item
Good.
for
Thank
the
you for that.
September 8th meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the letter, I would assume could just be a very much a rough draft in terms of the timing of this for agenda purposes, and you could
Yeah,
refine it.
it's gonna be
We're
very
just trying to
brief.
get, because we're just trying to get approval of concept from the full board on this. Okay, do we have any public comment on this issue?
This time, if a member of the public wishes to make a comment, you may hit the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I see nobody for public comment.
Okay. I'm assuming we have none at this point then?
That is correct. There's nobody for
Okay.
public comment.
Okay, all right, thank you. Then we will move on to item 16. Talking about establishing compensation for acting executive director. Who wants to start on this? Is this appropriate for council or Patty or me to talk about this initially?
Well, I think just in the last board meeting, I think it was a little unclear because of the, we had to take the emergency action on Pavo resigning. And so there was this concept of appointing Patty as acting. And it wasn't clear to me that that was interim or just acting. And I don't know that there was a clear direction given on whether or not the EC or.
Well, good point. There was.
So go ahead.
Well, good point. And I think the board discussed at some length whether or not to pursue the employment of an interim director, pursue the employment of a permanent director, or just, you know, have the acting director carry on. And the board voted, you know, with a split vote to proceed with advertising
Mhm.
for a permanent director. But as part of that, I just brought up that, well, if Patty's going to be in the acting role for any length of time while we pursue that process, it would be appropriate to discuss whether or not, you know, we should adjust her compensation during the time frame, you know, that she is in the role of acting director. And Linda had pointed out to me, we couldn't discuss, you know, executive director compensation except in an open public session as an agendized item. So sorry, Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've thought about this a lot and spoken briefly with Patty. I would like to make a suggestion that we give Patty, rather than a adjustment to salary, that we give Patty bonuses for, and I'm just going to throw this out there, $500 a week for each week that she has been acting. She's been functioning as acting executive director, starting from when Brooks left, and then ignoring the time that Pava was there, because it'd be approximately $2,000 a month as a bonus. And I'm just coming up with that figure somewhat arbitrarily, but I do think that a bonus is appropriate because she's been such a rock solid, stalwart staff person during this very difficult time. So more as a reward than a change in overall compensation. I think when we do the budget and we look at personnel costs, then we can consider an actual possible raise, or there might be cost of living. I don't know what's thrown in. Anyway, I thought I would start the conversation with that.
I lost you, Jan.
Did everybody hear?
Yeah,
I
Did
lost your
everybody hear
last,
me?
no, I lost your last about 20 seconds or so.
The last 20 seconds? I just said I thought that that a reward would be more appropriate than changing her overall compensation at this point. And when we go through the budget, that would be the time to look at whether her compensation needs to be adjusted.
And okay, thank you. And council, in terms of the, you know, that kind of being a personnel question, are there any issues relative to giving someone a bonus for fulfilling additional duties versus you know, an actual change in compensation?
No, I mean, they're relatively the same. I mean, it should be documented regardless of how you do it.
Okay. And I'm on board with Jan's idea. I don't know in terms of whether the dollar amount is a good dollar amount, only in the sense of, I'm not sure, I don't know off the top of my head what Patty's compensation level is. I'm going to assume, and Patty, you're the one that would know, that your compensation level is that if that was the dollar amount that we agreed on and recommended to the full board, that you know, that I don't know what percentage that would be, and I don't know how much of the gap it would close between you and the executive director's salary. I mean, in other words, is that a 10% increase, and there's a 30% difference between the two, or you know?
So
You
you
know
want me
that-
to answer that, Charles? I'm
Well, I'm
sorry to
assuming
interrupt
either you
talk over
or
you.
Barbara would be the ones who would know that.
So no, it's not going to close that gap. It's not 10%. But as I had the conversation with you privately, I'm not interested in compensation. And I'm very flattered, Jan. I appreciate that. But again, this is a time at the IWMA when money is definitely an issue. And so again, I'm perfectly happy and willing to continue on without any increase.
Well, we appreciate that. I think to some degree, though, you know, it's certainly appreciated. And if this was a short-term thing, like, you know, hey, you're going to be in charge for 4 weeks or something, yeah, I would expect you to kind of suck it up. But you know, but you could be doing this for a little while, and it seems to me that it at least warrants discussion. Robert, what are your thoughts?
One, if you increase someone's salary, anyone, it's very difficult to take that away at a later date. So my thinking is, if we're going to do something here, a change in Patty's salary, that we should really consider it a permanent number. I don't know when Patty's review would be in order of her to review her salary and potentially give her an upgrade. Charles, like you, I'm curious what the difference is in the two. Patty's comments of saying it, she's not, if that's not so important to her, I think it's more important to get the job done. My feeling right now is this is an opportunity for Patty to show us that, you know, what she can do. One of two things: she can become the director, or she can help us find someone, and then she's going to be very valuable in training the new director as to what the ins and outs of this business are. So I agree with Jan that, you know, Patty is doing more than what the responsibility of her job description, and some compensation along that way would be in order. However, if we do that, I would prefer to make it a permanent arrangement. And then if she became the director, then it would simply be the director's salary. So in light of that, I would support giving Patty some kind of a merit increase at this time, and consider it to be permanent.
So this is one of the odd things about compensation in open session is, you know, in terms of discussing performance, that can be done in closed session and should be. But so this, you know, the direction of the board can be to go back and evaluate salaries and merit increases in performance, and then come back to the entire EC to pick that amount. Or you can do it now. I just don't want to put anybody on the spot in terms of confidential information.
Now, Linda, I just want to say I was very careful not to mention numbers here.
Yeah.
And just talk about, you know, the job at hand, and that's why I didn't, you know, mention any specific numbers.
Right.
Linda, let me ask you this question. You know, Jan used the word bonus, and you seem to fine with that. Our organization doesn't have a bonus program, as far as I know, but would it be appropriate to say, especially in light of, you know, Patty's not looking for anything to happen right now anyway, from a personal perspective, but we think that some additional compensation might be warranted, that when the time comes, when Patty doesn't have to fulfill this role, and we know how much time that was, in other words, we know if that was a month, 3 months, 8 months, that we at that point could go, hey, we want to give Patty a bonus for having filled in the role of the executive director. And that way, you know, we could base it on, you know, a known amount of time, et cetera. Because I don't actually agree with Robert that once you give a raise, especially for filling in, that it needs to be permanent. I don't agree with that. Organizations frequently will go, okay, you're filling in, you know, you get 10% more, whatever the organization does, and then, you know, they knowingly revert to their former role and former compensation. But my question is, could we essentially punt with the idea that when we have a new a person that we look at it and based on performance, grant Patty a bonus?
I wouldn't recommend that. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think you need to incentivize people and pay them what they earn. And I think it's difficult after the fact to quantify that in a lump sum amount. And I think it's difficult for the budget. I just, that can work, but I don't recommend that.
Okay. Any other comments and in our actual recommended action going forward, action or no action going forward? Jan?
Well, Patty has essentially turned down the bonus idea, it sounds like to me. So I would like to suggest that we do an interim personnel evaluation of her. I'm not sure when it normally would take place. Usually it's on an annual basis. I don't know when it would normally take place, but I think it would make sense to have some kind of personnel evaluation of her sometime in the new year in 2022. If we would agree to that, that would give some time for things to kind of shake out, and then it would be a part of the regular process.
Patty, when is your evaluation?
It's typically in March.
Okay, and did you have one?
This last March I did not. It was postponed until later, but my hire date was in the month of March.
But you haven't had one for this year?
And no.
Okay.
So
Probably should address that.
So is that to say that being overdue, we could essentially do one
Yeah.
whenever we wanted between now and next March?
Yeah, I would recommend that, just because it is overdue. That's, and I know there's been a lot going on, but I think that's
Right.
what should happen.
I've never been part of an organization that wasn't woefully behind in their performance evaluations of personnel.
So what date would we be talking about? Waiting till March or bumping it up till January?
I would do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. We could do it I would guess at this point in time, maybe, we could do it in October or November or something. And normally though, of course, Patty's evaluation would be done
I couldn't
by,
understand. I couldn't hear what you said.
I'm sorry, let me try again. I would say we could do it in October or November, but of course, normally
Okay.
Patty's evaluation would be done by the executive director. So if we at some point in time, we hired
Right.
somebody
right.
or changed our election and hired an interim director, they would typically be the one
Mhm.
doing that. Typically, the board only rates the person who's in the role of the executive director. They don't rate other employees. So that's a potential. I mean, we're only in a position essentially to rate Patty while there's nobody else there above her. So.
Okay, so what about a date uncertain at this point if we can't come up with a date?
Yep.
But before March.
Well, how
so
about
that-
this?
so that- Okay,
Robert, I'm gonna let Robert talk, and then I'm gonna suggest something. Go ahead, Robert. Look like you had, getting ready to talk.
I would suggest we just wait until we see what's going to happen with the county here, which is in October. We'll know by November. So I'd put this on the agenda for the December meeting. And then if we wanted to make it retroactive at that time, we could do that too.
Yeah, I was gonna kind of recommend a similar thing, which is we set a point in time that if we have not hired a permanent or changed our mind and hired an interim director by a certain date, then we would evaluate Patty and do something accordingly. So if you say December, that's fine. I was thinking November, but I'm okay with whatever you guys think along those lines, but I kind of like that idea.
Okay, I only suggested December because county says they're leaving in October. Then by November, we'll have a meeting without them. And a lot of the dust will settle in that November period, and then we'd have a real good idea where we were going by December.
I agree. December sounds good.
Okay, then I
Christmas,
think we've got a consensus on that, so.
Yeah, and just a little housekeeping issue, just because it's come up. Patty needs to take the oath, I believe, of office, even as acting director. So she should probably, she can do that in written form. But Patty, we should get you that, and you should, I think you might have to attest in front of a notary, but if we could get that done and put in the record.
I can definitely do that. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds great. And so we don't need to administer that, a notary does that.
Well, you
Is
can
what you're
do
saying.
it. You can do it now, or it's just easier if we do it in writing after, unless somebody here
No,
feels comfortable.
We'll do it later. Okay, all righty. So we have a consensus then. Okay, that's good. Do we have any public comment on it, or did I already take public comment?
No, there's not been public comment yet. And just for clarification for the record, is this going to be a formal motion or no?
Council, what say you?
I would do a formal motion.
Okay, so Robert, you want to state your recommendation in the form of a motion?
my recommendation, and I'm following Jan's lead here, that we have an interim performance evaluation for Patty at the first meeting in December, the regular board meeting in December.
I think it would be in closed session, the actual evaluation.
Okay. Jan, I'm sorry, go ahead, Linda.
Thank you, Linda. In closed session, then.
I second it.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarification, I heard board. Is that board or executive committee?
It would be at the board. The board would have to do the voting to do that, but we would have it on our executive agenda just to review and make sure we were up to speed.
Okay,
And-
got that.
So
So
both.
And as Cheryl, as Linda noted, that would be in closed session as a personnel matter.
Yes, like I did get that. And I heard that we have a motion from Mr. Enns. Who was our second?
Marks,
Jan,
Okay, seeing in public comment.
At this time, if you wish to make a comment, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I see no public comment.
Okay, Mr. Verbo, are you ready for roll call
Yes.
vote?
yes, roll
Okay.
call, please.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Enns,
Yes,
Ms. Marks,
yes.
and Mr. Verbo?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, Mr. Verbo.
All right, thank you. So that allows us to move on to item 17, which is approving the draft full board agenda for next week's meeting. Does anybody
I think we've added several items.
have
Correct.
any
Yes.
comment or question? Go ahead.
Well, there's several items. You're going to add the rescission model ordinance matter. I believe the education matter was going to be added, consideration of the education services. And then this was something Patty brought up about the reduction, the shortcoming, I mean, hiring additional staff. So I don't know if that also needs to be addressed.
Oh, hiring,
A new 1383, or if
whether or not to proceed with the hiring of the replacement for Emily. Yeah, we discussed that and felt that that should be addressed at the full board.
so that would go on the agenda also.
And then forgive me, it looks like we'll have to add in under the consent agenda a special meeting at 3 p.m. today. And then on future agenda items, will we be adding any closed session for Newtson or anything else?
I don't think we'll know that until after you do the closed on that item.
Okay, thank you.
Because for council's purposes, though, you know, certain things are potential for litigation with the county and our open litigation with Knudsen, should we almost always just agendize that? And then
I think
if
we
we
should
don't need
agendize
to,
Knudsen until
Yeah.
the upcoming,
Mhm.
yeah,
Right.
if we don't have any information, we won't have any information, but I think that's what happened in this last go round is it kind of got added at the last minute and it would have been nice if it were on there. So yeah, let's agendize that.
so it seems like
Okay.
we should agendize that for the full board. And if we don't have anything to discuss, we would drop it.
Okay.
Okay, already with that, any other questions or I think we need a motion to approve the agenda for next week with those changes.
So moved.
Second,
Have a roll call, please. Well, actually, I guess we should see if there's any public comment on this.
At this time, if the member of the public would like to make a comment, please hit the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen, or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. Okay. Give me 1 second, Janine. Where'd it go? Okay, Janine, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Back to this budget. The I is reporting to the public that the budget is able to handle the expenses that you have outlaid in your current expense items. Given if the rates aren't approved, how are we going to meet these budget items? And I haven't heard the discussion yet about like the radio announcements, those items that I haven't even heard yet. Are we able to cover them? And I want to know that the budget is going to be addressed with the current participation from all the jurisdictions. That's it.
All right, thank you, Janine. Okay, with that, let's see. I said we needed a motion. I thought we had a motion, and
Yes, President Verbo, we have a motion and a second. Are you ready for roll call vote?
so now that we've had public comment, let's go ahead and do roll call. Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead and take
thank
the
you.
roll call.
Thank you. Ms. Marks,
Yes.
Mr. Enns,
yes.
Mr. Verbo,
Yes.
motion passes unanimously.
Okay, we'll move on to item 18. Any member comments or future agenda items? Usually the answer is no. We have listed here from Patty, Permanent Executive Director Search.
Mhm.
Patty, and then Jan, you had your hand raised.
Go ahead, Jan.
Oh, I was just going to say the same thing.
Oh,
And also that I think we should continue to try to get a written statement from the county about their plans for withdrawal from the IWMA. We shouldn't give up on that just because they're not doing what we asked. So, I mean, apparently a lower level staff person has said, oh, it's going to be on the Board of Supervisors agenda sometime in mid-September, and then it will be finalized. They'll give the 30 days notice and be finalized sometime in mid-October. That's what we've heard, but that's not actually a statement from their county council. I just think that it, as a matter of
Yeah, they will publish their
courtesy,
agenda,
they-
I believe.
yeah, they'll publish their agenda, but they also, as a matter of courtesy, professional courtesy, should acknowledge our request. So,
Right. They, as I understand it, having had a discussion with some folks from county council and Mr. Diodati, that they at the August 24th fourth Board of Supervisors meeting, they received some public comment. I don't know if it was positive or negative about their decision at the prior meeting. And they provided direction to staff to come back in public. They provided direction to staff to come back on September 14th with a resolution of withdrawal. And so I would expect that when you see their agenda for that meeting come out sometime next week, you absolutely will see that. I mean, I understand that we request a response. I think, their response is they have been directed in public by the Board of Supervisors to bring back a resolution of withdrawal on their September 14th agenda.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And beyond that, they received no additional guidance. So anyway, so Patty, did you have a comment regarding the status of our permanent executive director search?
No comment whatsoever, but the frank truth is that I haven't started it yet. And the reason being is I was sort of looking for some guardrails on how to define the position. And I think thankfully that the county is moving forward and we'll be able to get some definitive answers in the short term rather than the long term, so that when we do really write this up, whoever applies and in the end accepts the position will know exactly what the professional ramifications are. So they're not putting their reputation on the line, not knowing what they're getting into. So we will definitely be moving forward with this.
Okay, I guess the only question here is, do we need to put it on, do we need to discuss this at all on the full board agenda, or we just need to let it ride a bit? Okay, well, not hearing any comment,
I think for now, we just need to take a pause. We need
Okay.
to take a pause and go to the next, to the closed session, because you've got a hard stop, right?
Yeah, I do need, I'm
Okay.
watching the clock. All right, thank you. And so, yeah, we're going to go to closed session.
Can we take public comment first,
To
President
discuss,
Verbeau?
yeah, we're going to go to public comment. If there's any public comment on item number 19.
Okay, at this time, if you have public comment for item number 19, you may press the raise hand button found at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on the phone, you may press *9. I do not see any public comment.
Thank you. Then we will go ahead and proceed into closed session to discuss item number 19. And so Cheryl or Barbara, whoever's controlling the meeting, I guess we'll turn it over to me and then exit the meeting. And we will, I guess I don't know that we'll be able to come back into public session to report out on anything in closed session, and we'll just report out at next week's full board meeting, or do we need to open it back up and report out?
We take action, we'll report out.
Okay, if we take action, we'll report out. If not, we'll report that there was no reportable action in public at next week's full board meeting. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and enter into closed session.